Welcome back, FineScale Modeler Weekly.
That's right. After a short break while we moved offices and got the new studio set up, Tim, Kendra, and I are back for more fun.
And that just means there's more of me. So let's start looking at some kits.
Starting with a kit that I know will be welcomed by many.
From ClearProp, here's a 1/48 scale F86A Sabre.
While the Sabre has been well represented in plastic, the only 1/48 scale offering before now is an ancient Lindbergh offering. There was also a 1/72 scale kit from Matchbox.
What was it? Ancient?
Ancient.
Ancient?
Ancient.
Ancient. Okay. Surface detail on the airframe parts comprises very fine recessed panel lines and rivets that should look good under natural metal. The upper and lower wing halves are full span with separate ailerons, flaps, and leading edge slats. Inserts are provided for the inside of the slat bays. The one-part tailplanes have thin trailing edges.
The cockpit has side consoles with detailed tops, instrument panel, and multi-part ejection seat. The fuselage halves also sandwich a full intake trunk and jet pipe with front and rear fans, and the nose and main gear bays.
Other features include the one-piece intake lip, open speed brakes with detailed bays, separate tires and wheels, the early gun troughs with covers, drop tanks, and the early windshield with separate canopy. Other clear parts include the lights and the gun sight. Photo etch brass supplies seat belts, landing gear door actuators, and slat rails.
The decals offer a lot of stencils as well as markings for 3 colorful U.S. Air Force Sabres. A 94th Fighter Squadron aircraft at March Air Force Base in 1949, a 62nd Fighter Interceptor Squadron plane at Selfridge Air Force Base in 1950, and an F-86A from the 334th Fighter Squadron at the U.S. Air Force Gunnery Meet at Langley Air Force Base in 1950.
We think this kit looks really good in the box, but it'll probably look even better built.
I expect it to be a big hit.
With the war in Ukraine ongoing, it's hardly surprising that we're starting to see more kits of the military vehicles and hardware that are being employed.
And with much of that hardware coming from other countries, the possibilities expand.
Hence, this latest offering from Ukrainian company ICM, a 1/35th scale Leopard 2A6 with Ukrainian crew.
And, appropriately, since Germany supplied Ukraine with the Leopard 2A6s, Revell Germany is supplying ICM with the Leopard 2 in this kit.
New in 2012, this kit has been updated several times to represent modernized variants.
The hull builds from the belly and sides with internal braces, rear plate, top, and side skirts.
Suspension includes road wheel arms keyed for alignment, dual road wheels with good hub detail, and the drive sprockets, idlers, and return rollers. Vinyl track runs finish the running gear.
The massive turret has separate sides and lower front, movable cheek panels, separate hatches, and the mantlet to fit the 2-part gun. Small details like smoke launchers and tools look good.
No clear parts are supplied, but the kit includes a sheet of clear styrene with templates to cut out some optics. Decals supply markings for 5 Ukrainian tanks wearing NATO 3 color camo. One in summer 2023 in the Zaporizhia region, another in summer 2023 in Robotnia, one in Zaporizhia in autumn 2023, 2 variations of what appear to be the same tank in winter 2023-24, and another from winter 2024.
This kit also features newly tooled Ukrainian crew figures that are also available as a separate kit. Well molded, the set includes 5 figures, including a commander in the hatch, a soldier smoking a pipe and perched on the turret, a standing soldier feeding a dog a treat, and a pair who are carrying out track maintenance.
To equip this and other Ukrainian armed forces figures, ICM has produced a set of infantry weapons of Ukraine, including rifles, machine guns, rocket and missile launchers, and drones. The set also supplies a large decal sheet with uniform insignia and shoulder patches.
As a fan of Leopards, I can see myself adding this to my collection sooner rather than later.
Denis Villeneuve gave us probably the best cinematic representation of Frank Herbert's Dune world that we've seen.
With great visuals, including the best realization of the ornithopters I've ever seen, and it came the closest I've ever seen to matching what was in my head when I read those books.
Yeah, it was really cool. So anyway, The subject of our next kit, a 1/72 scale House Atreides Ornithopter from Meng.
Designed to press fit together, the parts are crisply molded. The crew and passenger cabin has controls and 5 seats and 4 crew figures. The fuselage has sandwich mechanisms for wings, which intermesh so they can move in unison.
The long wings have recessed lines and can move between folded and flight modes. Optional raised and lowered landing gear can be fitted interchangeably thanks to polycaps in the belly, and a stand is provided to show it in flight. Individual clear panes are supplied for the cabin windows. The Atreides crest is molded in a light tan and fits inset on the fuselage. No decals are provided, and the painting instructions show the Atreides aircraft as seen in the film.
This will be a big model, more than a foot long at the fuselage, and the wingspan's more than 2 feet, so it'll be imposing either on your display shelf or a contest table. If you like big trucks,
And I cannot lie.
then you'll want to pay attention to this next kit.
From Italeri, here's a 1/24 scale MAN TGX XXL tractor. The chassis of this curbside kit is molded with the oil pan, bottom of the radiator, inner front wheel linings, and rear fenders. It is detailed with the front and rear suspension, axles, brake tanks, fifth wheel, battery box, as well as wheels, rubber tires, and the transmission and drivetrain.
Inside the cab are seats, dash, overhead storage, inner door panels, and the bed for the sleeper. Typical of Italeri trucks, the cab builds from the front, sides, rear, roof, and aerodynamic skirts. Cartograph decals supply instrument cluster, badging inside and out, carbon fiber look graphics, and license plates for almost every European country. Foil stickers provide the side mirrors and the chrome trim for the front.
With the heap of red plastic in this kit, you should be able to make a pretty manly truck.
Really, Tim? Really?
You shush.
Such a dad joke. We've looked at Arma's terrific P-51s in 1/72 scale before.
Check the links in the description below for all that information.
Now the Polish manufacturer has released a deluxe set with 2 complete kits of the 1/72 scale P-51B.
In addition to 3D printed parts for the exhausts, seats, and radiators, the kit's decals supply markings for 9 aircraft. Captain Don Gentile's Shangri-La from the 336th Fighter Squadron, the Iowa Butte from the 354th Fighter Squadron, an RAF Mustang Mark III flown by Polish Wing Commander Stanislaw Skalski, Bald Eagle III from the 374th Fighter Squadron, a grimace-faced bird from the 355th Fighter Squadron with full D-Day stripes, Salem Representative from the 334th Fighter Squadron, Bonnie B from the 353rd Fighter Squadron, a natural metal Mustang Mark III from the RAF's 309th Polish Squadron, and as a bonus, another grimace-faced P-51B probably used as a hack by the 354th Fighter Squadron.
Another outstanding Mustang release from Arma.
We love Arma. Eduard is back with another beautiful Spitfire.
This one is the 1/48 scale Mk.XVI highback.
So the big difference between the Mark 16 and the Mark 9 is that the Packard-built Merlin engine is optimized for low altitude operations.
We've looked at a lot of Eduard Spits over the years, and many of the parts carry through, including the fuselage, wings, cockpit, and clear parts.
Decals supply markings for 6 Mark 16s. One flown by Squadron Leader Henry Zari of number 403 Squadron in Germany in April-May 1945, a number 416 Squadron bird in Belgium in December 1944, another Spit in Belgium in early 1945 with number 421 Squadron, a number 127 Squadron fighter flown by Squadron Leader Otto Smick in Belgium in 1944, November, a Spitfire from number 322 Squadron in the Netherlands in April 1945, and the mount of Wing Commander Donald Andrews in the UK in March through May 1945.
Another sharp Spitfire for fans of one of the prettiest aircraft ever built.
It absolutely is. Finally, today we have another welcome reissue from Minicraft.
Academy has reissued one of the classic Minicraft airliners, the Boeing 737 in 1:144 scale. For airliner nerds like me, this represents the 737-400.
Relatively simple, the fuselage halves feature molded door outlines and a few panel lines. The wings interlock to set the dihedral, and the engines have front fan and rear body details.
Cross-delta design decals give markings for two military aircraft, a Colombian 737 called Kronos, fitted to carry both cargo and passengers, and an Indonesian Air Force VIP transport.
It's nice to see this kit back on the shelves, and there are plenty of decals out there in the aftermarket to dress it up in whatever livery you want.
Indeed, I may just do that. Look for reviews of the F-86A at FineScale.com.
FineScale Modeler Weekly, brought to you by Hobby Zone USA, your source for hobby storage solutions, hard-to-find hobby tools, and aftermarket modeling needs. There still seems to be some confusion about sanding grits and how those are rated on sandpaper, on sanding sticks, sanding pads, and the like. So let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. First off, what you need to know is that sanding grits, the lower the number on the sanding grit, the coarser the grit is. And the higher the number, the finer the grit is. So, for example, I have 4 different grits of sandpaper here. The coarsest grit that I have, and the reason I've got it is not because you'd ever use it on a model. I mean, I do a lot of woodworking, so anyway, not that you would ever use this on a model, but it shows up really well on camera. This is 60 grit sandpaper. And so you can tell, very, very, very coarse. That's a very coarse grit. Next up, I've got 2 that look very similar to each other, but one is 220 grit and the other is 400. So this 220 is coarser than this 400. And you can hear that, I think. All right. And then finally, this sandpaper, very fine, is 600 grit. So the same idea applies to, say, these polishing pads right here. This 3200 grit polishing pad is going to be coarser than this 12,000 grit polishing pad. Now, what does all this mean? So that 60 grit or 80 grit or 100 grit sandpaper or sanding stick, it's going to remove more material with each pass of the sandpaper. And what we're doing then is we're working from those coarse grits up to the fine grits, because the finer grits are going to remove less material, and the scratches that they're leaving are going to become finer and finer until eventually the finest grit sandpaper that you're using really basically levels out all of the other, let's say, damage that you've caused previously. It's going to level all of that out and make it as smooth as possible. Now, the thing that we run into if we use just sandpaper, or if you're using sanding sticks or sanding sponges, is that they can be compressible, right? They will just shape to whatever it is that you're pushing up against. Even sanding sticks that you can buy at the store, they'll do that because they have some spongy material there. And sometimes what we really are looking for is a hard surface for the sandpaper to be up against. So that's why we would turn to something like this, a sanding block. This is a very old school one, wooden. You wrap sandpaper around it, nice hard surface. What's nice about a sanding block like this is that you can switch out the sandpaper, right? Or you can go to something like this with this Perspex material and then have a number of different grits that are already applied to it. Now that can cost you a little bit of money, but they are nice to have around. However, there's always this spot on a model that you got to try to get to, and you need something firm to get to it, and you don't want to use a normal sanding stick because it'll deform, and you don't want that deformation. So what do? Well, the solution is make your own firm sanding stick. Now, to make your own sanding sticks, you don't need a lot of materials. Basically 4 things. You need sandpaper. You need a utility knife. Now, if the thought of using your modeling knife to cut through sandpaper doesn't automatically make you cringe, you deserve what you get. Yeah? I mean, at that point, you might as well use your decaling scissors to go ahead and cut sandpaper. Let's get back to it. The utility knife, you're going to need some popsicle sticks and then a glue stick. Now, you can use a glue stick. I like using these because it's simple, easy. You can also use rubber cement. I don't like rubber cement as much because it can get glumpy and clumpy underneath the sandpaper as you're gluing it, so that can ruin the flat surface. The other thing you can use is spray adhesive. That works too. So, what do? You're going to choose the grit of sandpaper that you want on your sanding stick. Now, here's the thing. Your sanding stick, you're making it, so you can have whatever grits of sandpaper on there that you want. If you want to use the 60, great. If you want to use 800, you can do that too. I'm going to use 220, and I'm going to go ahead and put 220 all the way down one side of this stick, and then I'll put the 400 down the other side. If you have 4 grits of sandpaper, 4 different grits that you would like to have on a single stick, you can do that just as easily with this process. So first, what I'm going to do is just run this utility knife down the side of this sandpaper. Yeah, that's that knife screaming. That's okay. That's what a utility knife is for. Don't use your scissors on this. So that should fit reasonably well when you check it. And I'm okay with not having it all the way to the end there. I can trim that, which is something that we'll get to at the end of this. So next then, you take your glue, make sure you apply a liberal amount all the way down. Position it, get it flat, squeeze out the excess, and then let it dry. That'll cure up pretty fast. In the meantime, what I can do is I can make a second sanding stick. Boom. At this point then, I've got 2 sanding sticks. They ain't pretty, but they will definitely do the job. I'm going to go ahead and flip them over and then put the 400 grit on the other side. So those are my 2 sanding sticks. And like I say, I'm just going to let them dry, let the glue dry. And I like using this purple, like, kids' school glue stick because when it does dry, it dries clear. So I'll know when it has fully cured. Now that my new sanding sticks have dried, it's dried clear, time to give it a whirl. We got a little nub here. I know that one side is coarser than the other, so we'll start with the coarse side. Look at that. Doing the job. Now obviously, I could have done this with a commercially purchased sanding stick. But the point is that this is firm and it will not conform to any shapes that might already be introduced on the part. What's also nice about making your own sanding sticks in these cases is that if there's a spot that is awkward to get into, and oftentimes there is. You know, maybe you've got an area where you need to sand up next to something at an, you know, and you need to be able to get in there. Well, you can shape your sanding stick specifically for that particular work. Glue your sandpaper onto the end of it, and there you go. So that's just one example. Maybe you need something where you can get into a really tight spot. And you can always, instead of keeping the rounded ends, you can always square off the end and go ahead and make a square sanding stick as well. What's also nice about using the glue stick is that once you've used up the sandpaper on this sanding stick, you can very easily pry up one of the sides, peel it off, and then replace that sandpaper with a new strip. Easy peasy. So am I saying don't use commercial made sanding sticks? Just make all your own? Absolutely not, because I certainly won't do that. But I'm also not afraid to make those sanding sticks specific to the needs that I have at the workbench when I need to do it. So that's why I have an array of sandpaper at my workbench so that I can do those kinds of jobs. Just remember that when you're looking at grit, the lower the grit, the coarser the sandpaper, the more work it's going to do on each pass that you take on your model. The finer the grit, which means the higher the number, the less it's taking off every time. Recently, Aaron and I, for different reasons, had to reorganize our stashes. Now, of course, we're talking about the modeling stashes, not the, because mine's non-existent anymore and is, well, you know, kind of grows into the rest of it. Anyway, so for different reasons, we went back and we had to organize our stashes. Now, I'm going to stipulate right here out front that there is a big difference between my unbuilt kit collection and your unbuilt kit collection, and probably a big difference between mine and many of yours.
Orders of magnitude of difference.
Orders of magnitude of difference, and that comes from years of being very selective and very strict about what goes into my stash. So let's talk a little bit about yours first. So about how many kits do you have?
It's a little hard to tell specifically kits versus like decals and detail sets, but it's probably 600-700 kits.
Okay, 600 or 700 kits. Some people out there are like probably going, oh, that's a lot of kits. Others are going, child's play. Wait until you hear about mine. Anyway,
Yes.
Okay, so 600 or 700 kits.
Yep.
So what's your organizing factor before this most recent organizing?
You're assuming there was any organizing factor, Tim.
Okay.
And that was part of the problem, is that I would just add something to it. And I most of my stash is in a corner of the basement.
Okay.
Corner being a very...
How about one end of the basement?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we'll say and, yes, sure.
All right.
If for years it had just been, I would try to find a place for things, and at one point in time there were just boxes of things there, and I couldn't see what was in it.
So what generated the... So there wasn't really an organizing principle beyond just being able to fit something in, sort of Tetris it in there.
Yes. Yeah.
So what sort of pushed you into reorganizing your stash, and what did that entail, and how are you organizing it now?
The impetus behind the reorganization was I just needed to get a handle on what I had, and I knew there were things in that collection that I had picked up at some point in time thinking I was interested in, and then I realized it didn't fit anymore with what I was interested in. I didn't necessarily want to keep it around. So I decided that I was going to focus on the areas of interest, which is not to say I have a single area of interest, because I have like 3 or 4. And I would try to group things into areas so that I knew if I was looking for something the Australians flew,
Okay.
then it was going to be in this area.
And if there was something sci-fi?
If there was a sci-fi, it would be here. If there was an airliner, it would be here. And then there were the other odds and ends, which are sort of sprinkled in amongst those. Like I have a lot of Spitfires, I have a lot of F-15s. So that was the organizing principle going forward. Now, it's not perfect yet, but it's close.
When organizing, did you downsize at all?
I did. I got rid of the things that I knew that didn't fit either scale-wise or interest-wise with what I would be looking at going forward. So,
And what was the primary way that you did that, the downsizing?
Either gave it to people that I knew would want it, or I sold some stuff here and there, so I could,
On like eBay.
like eBay.
There you go. So you made a little bit of money.
Yes,
Might have made some.
which I could turn back into adding other things to the stash that fit more with others.
So that's an important question. Oh, we got a fuzzy here. That's an important question. So you did this reorganization.
Yep.
Has the stash grown since it was shrunk?
A little bit. I mean, we were just at
IPMS Nationals?
USA Nationals, and that vendor room is, full of temptations.
Yeah,
But I was able to pick up a couple things that fit my RAAF collection, the new Airfix Bristol Bulldog.
Okay.
Somebody had one of those. I'm like, oh, that's going in there because I had wanted one of those. And then the Special Hobby L4 Grasshopper, because the Australians had a few of those too. So they were things that fit with the collection. There's also the Atreides Ornithopter from Dune, which I added a little while ago. So, but again, those fit within specific areas. It's not like, I like this. This airplane's kind of cool. I'm just going to add that in there, which was, for a while, the temptation was always to add just something because it was cool. But I'm trying to avoid that.
Okay.
Just because it's a cool thing.
All right.
So.
Well, there you go. So you downsized a bit.
Yes.
And then got organized again.
Yes.
Okay.
Trying to stick to a plan.
Very good.
So what about yours? I mean, your impetus was different than mine, right?
Yeah. So mine wasn't so much a reorganization of the stash, although it was more of a moving and a consolidation of it because it was in a few different places. And when we talk about the difference in number of kits, I have 38 kits in my stash.
Amateur.
Yeah. Well, you call it what you want.
I am, of course.
I'm very strict about what comes in and how it has to be handled, because pretty much the way that I operate, if something comes in, something's got to go out. And so if that means I have to give away a kit or I got to complete a kit or something along those lines,
sure.
I keep it strictly very much. And boy, is it hard, especially working here or around this guy who's constantly, hey, how about this kit? Or how about this kit? Or, Tim, let's go walk the vendor room. And oh, look at this new thing.
Or look at this large stack of Wingnut Wings kits.
Well,
because I know you have a.
That is the bulk of my collection. That and Star Wars stuff. And I don't count small scale miniatures as kits, even though they might be multi-part.
And so what you're saying is your stash is actually larger than 38 kits if we start getting into the figures?
If you get into the figures, things start, but figures are very well contained. So
just because they're small. Yes.
Just because they're small.
That just means you can fit hundreds of them in a small space.
Right. So the reason though for the movement was because I was reorganizing my workshop, and I've got a better feng shui going on with how the workbenches, at least for me, how they operate and that whole thing. So yeah, that it wasn't complicated in the moving of the kits so much as it was rearranging the workbenches and getting that whole thing in there. So now I've got 2 long workbenches and then that third really big one that I share with my wife who does glass work. So it's a better feeling now in that workshop, which is good. What we want to do is ask you, how do you maintain your model stash? How big is it? what does it look like? Where is it at? Is it in your house? Or is it in some rented space that's off-site that you have to visit, and you've got a very complicated catalog on how you...
And are you just shoving the next one in on top of, wedging it in around the others? Or are you alphabetizing them by subject matter?
What's your organizing principle? We want to know. So please leave your comments below, or
email editor@finescale.com.
And include photos, if you would, because that would be really cool to see. And maybe we'll show you a couple of photos of what we got going on.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Anyway, thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time.
Bye. You don't get to laugh. Incorrect. Do it again.
Yes, I made a mistake, Tim. Jersey fried chicken.
Woo! I don't give away the ooh la la. Make sure you wash the noodles, bud. Redundancies.
Dude, you just broke it.
It's in pieces.
We're gonna have to get some glue. We've looked at Arma. Shut up!
Fuselage. So there still seems to be some confusion. If you think you can do it better than me, by all means, go make your own freaking video.